everyone! My name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we are back again with another asexuality related topic, and I don't know if this has an overarching term for it or not, but basically what I want to get to is the different ways that various asexual people relate to sex. This is something that I have talked about in kind of various ways in different videos, but I really wanted to get down into the detail of what all of those varying experiences might look like. And I know that you all are very excited about it, and I am excited for this discussion as well, because I think a lot of people have very strong stereotypes about what they think asexual people think about sex. And I think this is an area that instead has a lot of opportunities for nuance and informing everyone that being asexual doesn't always have to look one way. Now, speaking of stereotypes, the number one sort of first point on our spectrum is being sex repulsed. And this as a label is, I think, what most people assume asexual people are like in its most extreme form. So in that sort of farthest far end of the spectrum, somebody who is sex repulsed, just complete cringe, just so gross. The idea of sex is very, very, very strongly negative for them. They could not imagine even having to be in the same house as people that are having sex, let alone having to think about having sex with other people as themselves. They really, really just do not like the very concept of it. Now, this is the stereotype. This is what people think all ace people must be like, and that is simply not the case. But even among people that are sex repulsed, there are varying levels of experience. People can be like what I just mentioned, or they can be a little bit more loose with their definition. They might instead feel very, very strongly about things like penetrative intercourse, but maybe other things don't really bother them that much, and they don't even really think about it. I've also heard the alternative label sex adverse for people for whom the repulsion is not really about sex as a concept, but instead it's about the idea of them having to have sex with other people. And I think that is a great alternative because it kind of steps away from the idea that sex is just always super gross in all cases and is more focused on that individual personal experience of how people think about sex and if they want to have it or not. Now, one key thing to note here is that being sex repulsed is not the same thing as being sex negative. I am sure there are many very detailed videos on YouTube going into exactly what it is to be sex negative, but essentially, very concisely, what it is it is a philosophy, a thought that sex is essentially dirty outside of very particular acts inside of a heterosexual Christian, usually, marriage, and that all other types of sex are bad and they taint the people that do it. It is very key to know that just because someone is sex repulsed doesn't mean they are passing some kind of moral judgment about other people that choose to have sex, or they believe that having sex would make them dirty. It is not about some kind of philosophical statement. It is just about how does the idea of having sex make you feel, and that's really the long and the short of it. Now, as we go from the far point of the spectrum into more of the middle, we get into something known as being sex neutral or sex indifferent. This is where I fall on the spectrum, and essentially what it means is you don't really feel strongly about sex either way. It's not completely gross, but you're not actively intrigued by it either. It's kind of like, oh, hey, look, there's a cloud in the sky. Okay, cool, look at this thing over here. Like, it doesn't really hold your attention that much. It's not really something you think about super often, and it's not really something that bugs you either. The test that I have in my head for being sex neutral is something like this. I basically go, okay, well, if somebody offered me to have good sex or a good piece of cake, which would I choose? And in my mind, I would choose the cake 98% of the time. But it's not because I find sex to be like completely gross or whatever. It's just like cake. Cake sounds better. I don't know. I like cake. And this is such a common thought in the community of asexual people on the AVEN forums that we even have a term for it, which is I would rather eat cake, which I think is really cute and lovely. Now, compared to people that are sex repulsed, those that are neutral or indifferent are more likely to have sex with their partners. This could be because they want to have kids, because it is an important bonding activity, or because the act of having sex is a social signifier of the value placed in the relationship. Another area that is sort of on the midpoint of the spectrum that is not quite the same is something called sex ambivalence. I know there's a lot of terms going on. This is not the same thing as being sex adverse. What this is about is it is a sort of catch-all term. It is when your experience doesn't really fit into any of the other labels, or maybe you fit into multiple labels at the same time. So you maybe have somebody that their opinions about sex changes a lot. Maybe they are sex repulsed when they are not in a relationship and sex neutral when they are, or vice versa. Or maybe you have very strong feelings that fit into multiple categories at the same time. So maybe you have someone that is very strongly repulsed by the idea of sex acts that involve penetration, but everything else they are kind of neutral on. Depending on the person, they may decide that sex ambivalent is the label that works for them. Other people with that same set of feelings, that same experience, may decide they want to use the term sex repulsed. It is totally individual, and for me, this is all about having options. It's about having different terms that either work for you or don't, that you can choose from to better understand your own experience of how you feel about these things. It's not really about it being like a hard and fast, you can't use this term if you use it this way or whatever. It is, there's no rule book for this, there's no law. It's about what works for you and just having that additional language at your disposal to help have better, easier conversations. Now, speaking of having better conversations, as we get into the very last part of the categories here, the last endpoint of the spectrum, we have being sex favorable. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, Evie, that seems like an oxymoron. How can you be asexual if you like sex? Isn't the whole point of being asexual that you hate sex? And no, it's not about hating sex. Although there are some ace people that feel that way, I think we do need to go back to remembering the definition here of what it means to be asexual. Being asexual is not about choosing to have sex or not. It is about a lack of sexual attraction. And you can feel any old way about sex and not experience sexual attraction. When an ace person says that they are sex favorable, what they typically mean is that they have a more positive relationship with sex. They are more open to it, they physically enjoy it, even if they don't necessarily have that experience of attraction. And it can be a little bit confusing to know exactly where that boundary is between indifference and favorable. Somebody may even go between them depending on circumstances. But what I think about is when you are somebody that is sex neutral or indifferent, having sex is more like something that you agree to do as like a compromise in a relationship, not necessarily something that you actively look forward to. It's more like being asked by your partner to do a small favor for them that takes you like 2 minutes. It's like, oh hey, can you like put the sheets in the dryer? Can you have sex with me? Like, it's very, very interchangeable in terms of like how intense that ask is. It's not really a big deal, but it's not something you're like, oh, I gotta put this on my calendar. I'm really looking forward to the next time we're gonna have sex. It's just something you are willing to do, even if you're not like super, super into it, you know? Whereas people that are sex favorable tend to have a more enjoyable experience. It can be something that is a little bit more negotiated, of course, but it tends to be something that they are more actively like yes about. Yes, I'm into this. This feels good for me. I want to have this. And of course, they are also more likely to have sex with their partners more frequently. But again, that does not necessarily mean that they are experiencing sexual attraction. It is, I think, another stereotype within a stereotype that ace people basically like don't feel anything, like our genitals just don't work, it just everything's turned off downstairs. That is not really true. Like for most of us, our genitals work just fine. Being ace doesn't mean you can't feel pleasure or have certain biological responses. And so yes, it is totally possible that an ace person could get pleasure from sex and enjoy that even if they do not experience attraction. And I know this conversation may be a little confusing for some people. I know that probably more than a few of you that have watched this didn't realize there were so many different ways that ace people could relate to sex, but I hope that I gave you some additional ideas that maybe you hadn't considered before. And remember, this is not about trying to make the most complicated label possible or win some kind of award for most obscure label. It is about being able to have more terms, more language available to have better conversations with our partners, with our friends, with our loved ones, so they understand our experience a little bit better, so that way they just understand what it's like to be us, because doesn't everyone want to be understood? And also at the same time, it's kind of important when you are getting into a relationship that somebody understands how you feel about sex, right? So I really think this is an important tool in your toolbox. And of course, even if you aren't asexual, many different people have different ways they feel about sex. So even if you aren't ace, feel free to use these terms. I am giving you permission to do that. I am probably going to get arrested by the asexual police now that I've said that, but I do think it is an important piece of language that a lot of people can benefit from. So with all of that being said, again, I hope that you all enjoyed this. If you all have any comments, questions, stories, want to talk about your own labels, how you describe your experience, you can put that down in the comment section below. I would love to hear from you all. If you enjoyed this, if you have not already, please do subscribe, because I make videos twice a week about all sorts of kink, BDSM, asexuality, relationship-related topics. And finally, if you really enjoyed this, if you want to support what I do, the best way you can do that is with Patreon. That is what makes everything on my channel possible, including these videos on asexuality. If you want to check that out, a link will be down below. If you do already support me over there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you all next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.